Welcome back, everybody, to the Leadership Ignition Team podcast. We're glad to be back in studio. We had a little bit of a break, but we're back live. I am one of the hosts, Shane Beckham.
And I'm the other guy, Mike Huff. And man, it's good to be back, Shane. What are we talking about today?
So today, Mike, we're going to talk about a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. If you work for me or have ever worked for me, you've probably heard this word 400 million times, and I probably will say it 400 more million before I pass away. And that word is standards, Mike. And we want to correlate that with another emotion, because I don't believe enough people, myself included, can get out of their own way sometimes. And what does that mean? Well, for me, from a very high level, before I kick it back, is just standards over feelings is going to be what we spend most of our time on today. And Mike, when I say that, what's the first thing that comes to mind to you? What comes to mind when we talk about that?
I think it's really around why choose one or the other. Why is one more appropriate than the other? And the thing that comes to mind is that standards create consistency and emotions create reactions. And so, when you think about, if you have standards, you don't have to make decisions when you're emotional. Decisions have been made a long time ago. You made the decision when you created your standard. So what do we mean by standards? We mean, who am I as a man? Who am I as a father? Who am I as a friend? Who am I in every personal and social environment that you're in? Who am I as a boss? Who am I as a leader? Once you've decided that, you sat down, you wrote it out, you committed to it. This is absolutely who I'm going to become. Look, sometimes it's aspirational. It's not who you are today even, but it's who you know you need to be or who you want to be. It's not acting. It's growing. It's learning how to become and getting in those traits and living in those standards. Then when the emotions hit, I'm tired, I'm angry, frustrated, I'm elated. Even happiness creates issues when you're trying to make decisions, right? You're in a really great place suddenly financially. Well, if I don't have standards, I could go blow all that money just like that. So positive feelings or emotions are just as challenging as non-positive emotions when you don't have standards. But when you have standards, you don't have to think anymore. You just do the thing that you are instead of do the thing that you feel. And so to me, Shane, that's the beginning.
I think that's great. I read a lot of those concepts, read about that in a book. I can't place the book, but it talked a lot about what you were just saying. And one of the things that you said there made a lot of sense to me, because the standard is the standard. And to me, Mike, tying it back to a personal level before I dive deeper into like teams and other things like that, because that's kind of what you're hitting on here out of the gate, is just one thing I preach to the people of the gym or anybody that'll listen is, what are your personal standards first? Okay. What are you about? One of the things I always ask, what is your personal mission statement? Okay. Maybe you have one, maybe you don't, but to me, that's going to tell you a lot about the standards. Mike, we both served in the armed forces, and what's one of the first things we are taught out of the gate? This is the standard. You will not fall below this line. I mean, that is day one, right off the bus.
Yep.
To me, that's stuck in my personal life and in my professional life. But the problem that a lot of people have is, one, they never identify what standard they truly want to hold for themselves because they're worried about what everybody else thinks, or they want to fit in. Or two, if you're like me and you're a borderline perfectionist, the standards can become so intense that they're very difficult to hit. I believe that you have to have very high standards for yourself, but sometimes you can set expectations for others and unintentionally set them up for failure. So I think there's some lines that have to be drawn as we identify, Mike, how to build these standards out, because it goes back to you. A lot of the standard of your life is who you are as a person. What type of moral compass do you have? What type of legacy do you want to leave? Because the standards are going to set that mark. To your point, once the standard is established, it's just who you are. It's not an emotional control. It's like, I get up, I'm on time, I get my workouts in, I work as hard as I can. That is the standard I set for myself. People don't do a lot of that. They just kind of go with the flow, and that's okay too. I'm not saying don't go with the flow, Mike, but that kind of makes sense. Like, How do you set your standards?
I think the first question is why don't people do it? And so, I dissected this a little bit. We're thinking about it in my head, and why people don't do it is because of all the things that cause most of our decisions in today's current world, which is we choose to do the things that feel good in the short run versus the things that will do us good in the long run. And so that's very emotionally based because that feels easier. You think about it, oh man, I just get to react however the hell I feel. I don't have to have these guidelines that I have to live by. I can, in this environment, I can do this. In that environment, I can do this, even though they're totally different things from each other. And they don't define a single person. The problem is that feels easier, but it's kind of like what your hat says. You're going to be uncomfortable either way. If you set the standards, initially it's hard because now you have to be disciplined around those standards. Eventually it becomes very easy because it's just who you are. There's no thinking to be had. But initially it's hard. And people want that instant gratification of not having the hard thing to do. That's why people don't do it. And so then you say, well, how do you create your standards? Well, it's easier than you think to create them. It's then very difficult to go force yourself to live them. In the creating of them, it's as simple as sitting down in a quiet place, being in the right state of mind, not doing it when you're emotional, either positive or negative, when you're riding the green, and write down your to-be list. We've talked about this a bunch of times before. Who do you want to be in your relationships with your significant other, with your kids, as a man, just in the world, how you want to impact those around you, in your job as a leader? You write down those to-be lists, how you want to live, what kind of house you want to be in, what kind of town you want to live in. And all of that stuff is the destination. And by the way, when you get there, you're going to write a new to be list because you're going to have new ideas. But that's how you start. And then, Shane, once you've done that, now the hard work begins. So, how do you start to live those standards? What are your thoughts around that?
So I think that's a fantastic concept. And again, one of the things that I feel like people need to do more of, and that is taking time to sit and collect their thoughts and actually put things down on paper, journaling or just a blank notepad. To your point, most people that are probably listening to this have not taken a piece of paper out and said, "Be list." To your point, because a lot of the to be's can be correlated into goals. Like there's some connections there, but it starts establishing the pattern. Most people have a desire to be the best versions of themselves. It's just human nature. But what is the roadblock? Because Mike, I think you have to have the to be list, but next to that, you have to say roadblock and potential obstacles. And you can draw lines to those things. And okay, then you can start taking that a step forward and say, what is my action plan to become this list? Because now you're starting to develop the thread of the standard. Every year it happens. Calendars are drivers of change. December. January's coming. What happens though, Mike? People overload the wagon. Okay. Your to be list can't be 99 things at once. It has to be the list, and then you have to properly identify the top one or two things on that list and start there. One of the big things that I've tried to teach lately is build the standard of consistency in your gym. Okay. This concept, right? And I'm still not talking about the employee part of the team because to me, that's where standards, just because of the military brain, but personally trying to help someone or yourself, right? Try to start with one thing. And how many times do we say this? How many times do you hear this on other podcasts? Just start with one thing, but people overcomplicate it because they see the shiny object and they think they've got to do all these things to get it. So our concept has changed a little bit. What I teach now, what I tell people when I get on the phone with them is, look, here's what you told me your number one goal is. Okay. And I go through a quick recap and I'll say, is that fair? Yes. Okay. Well, instead of being like not every other, but a big majority of humans, when they go into something like this and say, I'm going to get up at 4 a.m. every day, go to the gym 6 days a week. I'm going to stop eating all this food. I'm going to stop drinking alcohol. I'm going to write in my journal they stack like 8 things. Okay. That's their new standard. Well, how do you think that's going to work out, Mike? Unless you are a highly, highly disciplined person, You're going to miss on day one. And then what's that feel like? You already feel defeated. You didn't get any wins. And then what happens day two, day three? And before you know it, 28 days later, you've done forgot everything that was on that list and you're living exactly the way you were. So to your point, Mike, create one standard at a time because eventually it becomes who you are. You have the opportunity to change that today. You do not have to wait till Monday. You can say, okay, my new standard is I'm going to be more consistent at the gym. To me, set the standard and go, make sure I'm going to go 3 days a week. Mike, even by my math, 3 is greater than 0. That can be clarified. Yeah, that is assured, right?
I think that's true.
So my point to this is make your list of to be, have your roadblocks and potentials, but then you have to take it that step further. What you talk about is what is my action plan? And where does the standard start? Where am I now? Where do I want to get to? And what's the path? And take small bites of that apple, because more and more I see people trying to eat the whole apple in one bite. Never works. So to me, Mike, it's taking things down a notch. As humans, we overcomplicate everything, and standards are no different because we tell ourselves that we can change all these things at once. That is the emotion you were talking about. That has nothing to do with the standard. The standard's a damn standard no matter what happens.
Right.
This is still the standard.
Yep.
You're just under it. So it's kind of.
Yeah, totally. And interestingly, I think about Mac's story. We've talked about Mac before. Mac's a good friend of mine. He's an author. He writes these books called Blue Collar Leadership Series. If you haven't had a chance to read them, they're quick reads. They're really good books to do book studies with, specifically if you run a blue collar team. But Max describes people and their standards. He doesn't call them their standards this way, but he describes them in a bit of a 0 to 10 kind of thermometer, Shane. So if you think about all of us, we've all got a theoretical number. Pick it on what scale, whether you're a leader or you're an employee or you're a dad or you're a husband or you're whatever. You got a number. And if you're a 0 to 10, you have a standard. Whether you set that standard or not, people see your standard. They see you as a 1 or a 2. Or if you set the standard to an 8 or a 9 or a 10, then you work to achieve the 8 or 9 or a 10. Look, even if you're a 1 or 2, you can be substandard. And even if you set the standard at 8, 9, or 10, doesn't mean you're always going to be an 8, 9, or a 10. You're going to miss the standard sometimes. The difference is when we're in the Army, the good guys go in the Army. Sorry, Marine. When you're in the Army, your drill sergeant reminds you when you're below the standard. When you're a man, when you're a leader, no one's going to remind you. They're just going to see it. And they're going to write down in their own little book of memory where you were on that standard scale. You're the drill sergeant of your life when you create your own standards, which is why it's so hard for people. People are always looking for somebody else to tell them how to navigate life. When you take control, when you create your own standard, that's when you know that you finally got there. Even if you haven't reached the standard, but at least you've taken control and you've created that standard. Short story, came back to the office this week. We haven't told the audience because we've been out for 2 months, but I told you big news was coming in the last podcast, which we just released last week. It was really about January, but hopefully people got a kick out of it anyway. Technical issues that are solved. Thank you to all of our platform partners. We sold the company. So, working for 8.5 years to get GAT to a place where we could sell. We had a pandemic in the middle of all that in the airline ground handling business, and Sky Cafe, our catering business. We sold it to a strategic buyer. And so I've moved out of the CEO role and I'm a consultant now. So I'm not coming to Atlanta as often as we start to move things to different places. And I came here this week to get some work done with the team. And just this morning, we're standing outside the coffee station. At the coffee station, we've got snacks and we've got a cooler with drinks and stuff like that. And one of our finance team members comes up to me and she goes, "Ever since you became a consultant, this place has gone to hell." So what do you mean? He said, "Look, there's little Debbie's in the snack drawer. That was never here before. There's no protein shakes in the cooler. What is going on around here?" I said, and my exact words were, "Well, I guess we let our standards slip because I wasn't around looking at them." So that's how simple, but they impact people, and people hear that stuff, and people see that stuff every day. So once you've created a standard, if you let it slip, if you try to do too much and you can't focus for whatever reason, that's what happened here. People are busy, and so they're defaulting to old behaviors. That's where the trouble happens, and that's why people give up. But guess what? You get to wake up tomorrow and fill the fridge with protein drinks again if you want to. You don't, just because you slip doesn't mean you have to stay slipped. Thoughts on that, Shane?
Yeah, I think that's a great point because sometimes we forget about that. And again, you've told me before, being on vacation, which is rare, but just being gone and trying to hold the standards, but understanding there's also a time that you can relax, but you have to have them first, right? And I think that's the thing that people misconstrue. You know, everybody that has high standards, you can immediately usually tell. One example is when I see my teammates, and I've had a massive team transition. It's been extremely hard on me. It's been extremely hard on the rest of the team that's still there. It's been hard on the gym. I've learned that that happens in the situations like gyms and even every company. But you look around, you have a very strong team, and then next thing you know, you're like, wait a minute, what happened? And bringing in a lot of new people, one thing that I've learned is it's people get really nervous around me for some reason. And I've been trying my hardest to figure this out because I find myself as if I think I'm a fairly decent teacher. I'm intense, sure, but I finally just broke it down to said, look, the standard is the standard. Okay. Do I expect you to be perfect? Absolutely not. But here's an example of a standard. If I say ass in seat at 4:35 a.m. and you constantly walk in the door at 4:34 and 30 seconds, one little thing is going to cause you to miss the standard. I'm not saying being here at 4:15, but I'm saying you're walking right on the line every single time you do that because you know what the standard is. You know what it is. It's your emotional decision to say, I'm going to wait to the very last second to leave my house. That's one random example, but I see it happen all the time. And the people that get there 5 or 10 minutes early, usually I can say they have a little bit more of a higher standard to do things the right way. I'm not saying that they're lazy. They're on time. But it's just like when I walk into the gym, Mike, one of the first things I take them out on the floor and I say, I want you to look at something right now. And they're day one and we're standing in the center of the gym floor. And I say, take a look around and tell me what you see. It's neat. It's nice. I said, exactly. That is the emotional response I want anyone to have when they step foot in this place. You know why? Because we have high standards.
Well, and you've told me before, not just nice and neat, consistent. It looks the same
Consistency.
every time I come in.
And that's exactly where I was headed. Like, and that's to my point. I'm like, you don't have to be nervous around me.
Yeah.
This is the standard.
Yeah.
All I want is consistency. And I won't say names on here, but I'll say, okay, I want Coach Shane to do it the same way as Coach Mike, to do it the same way as Coach Brad, Coach Jenny. But here's the thing. We're not going to be the same coaches because Mike's going to coach different than me. And I have no problem with that. I want you to do it consistently the same way. This is the time we go on the floor. This is how we push the button. This is when we turn the volume up. That is the standard of consistency that I'm chasing. But here's the next level of that, Mike. And one of the hardest things that I've found to teach to other humans is if me and you are coaching, we both know what the standards are. We've developed a rapport. We're friends. And I continuously see you doing something that I know is not the standard. It is extremely difficult to get that teammate to say something.
That's right. That's exactly right.
But it's a disservice
Yep.
to Mike because if I don't tell Mike, I'm allowing him to do this. Either he's taking the shortcut on purpose, he's being lazy, or he just doesn't know. But he's hurting the team because he is lowering the standards. So to me, Mike, that is when we have standards over feelings. I don't want to hurt Mike's feelings. So instead, I'm bringing this, I am lowering my standard to meet Mike where he's at. Instead of doing what you talk about, pulling Mike up to the standard. Because if Mike can't hold the standard, Mike will be unemployed. That's just the way it is. And you live by that. This is the standard.
And won't that hurt his feelings way more?
Yes, you're going to get Mike fired. That's what I tell people. You're going to get, what happens when I see it?
Just tell the man to put his bands away.
Just put the stuff up, man. Standards over feelings, because Mike, when you tie those two words together, it's often when it comes to someone else, even ourselves, we let ourselves down, but we're so reluctant to tell a family member, a teammate, a spouse, hey, you're really lowering the standard here, because we know the outcome can be confrontational. And we would rather live what? out of that. But here's the reality.
That's exactly right.
You're uncomfortable because you see it,
Right.
so you might as well correct it and fix it. So to me, that's just one of the hardest things I see, Mike.
Or you get comfortable with it in the short run, but then it has major implications in the long run when you accept those lower standards, and that is where it gets really uncomfortable. The other thing, so in teams, this idea of standards is so important. It's so important. As you talked about the military, it's drilled into you. That is the military. It is having standards and living up to them. Actually, in recent times, you hear a lot of more senior folks in the military saying the standards are dropping. We're creating lower standards for our troops. I mean, it's just in little ways. It's stupid things, but like they don't have to polish their boots anymore. So because we purchase boots that don't require polish. Part of that's because a lot of our action is in the desert. You don't need polished boots in the desert, but you also don't have to have starched BDUs. I never understood why we had to have starched BDUs to begin with. They're battle dress uniforms, right? However, there was a reason we did that, and it was to create discipline and standards. It's just like in my business, people walk around with their vests unzipped. It's a failure item. Or they don't wear hearing protection the second they walk out the door. They don't put it in until the airplane's coming in. That's not our standard. Our standard is your vest will be zipped and you'll have your hearing protection. Do you need to have your vest zipped at all times? Probably not. Do you need to have hearing protection the second you walk out the door? No. But if we create that as our standard and now it's a 9 and you hit an 8, you're still safe. But if I make it a 7 and you hit a 5, you're no longer safe. And so those standards are there for reasons to drive different outcomes. And in team environments, and you're going to get there, Shane, you've had a lot of transition. When you are consistent in your standards create the culture. And the culture doesn't become one of people sniping each other behind the back on feelings, whatever, because none of that's relevant. You've got standards for everything. It starts from little standards like wearing the vest or polishing the boots, but it also is embodied in the big standards, like what are our team's core values, and do we talk about them in every single meeting? It is what creates our systems of how we interact with each other, in terms of how we talk to each other, in terms of how we make decisions, in terms of what things are priority over other things. And when you've got core values, they should all be the same importance, but they should also be stack ranked in such a way that when you have to make a decision, you know which one to choose.
Right.
Do you choose financial performance over safety? Do you choose team member happiness over meeting your growth targets? If you don't make that decision on the front end, you just have 4 standards that say we're safe, we care about each other, we're going to hit our performance targets, and we're going to make our financial targets. That's great. But when I have to make a decision between those 4, what decision do I make? If you wait until that time, you're going to make the decision that suits that moment. If you create the standard on which one is more important at the beginning, no decision will be made. You just do what the standard says. And so then you don't have to worry about what happens to your culture over time. So I'm very passionate about this in organizations with culture. It's what's made this company that we just sold very, very successful. And it's what's going to make my next venture be very, very successful. So we're going to do the same thing. It doesn't matter what it is. And so I just, to me, I think that's the secret to building a great business and building a great team.
Couldn't agree more. You've done a masterful job, and congratulations on what you've accomplished there, sir. And I'm excited for you and your future endeavors. But I know you've worked very hard to be in the position that you're in, and I admire that about you. And I know that your standards. Sometimes I shake my head at you when you may be fighting a partial injury or something, but you know what? You find a way to still make your standards reality. And you made an excellent point. It's people recognize when the standard's being broken because you established the standard early. It becomes subconscious. One of the analogies I use is, hey, does someone have to tell you to brush your teeth in the mornings? Nope. You know why? Because that was drilled into you 100 million times as a kid, right? So now what do? It's just, you don't even think about it anymore. That's just one minute example of all of the subconscious things that we do. Well, when you build the standard that way, you want your team to start doing the standard subconsciously. That is how you get better. That is how you build culture.
Yes.
One of the things I've realized even on this call is I've got to get, the core values printed and put up in the gym somewhere. Like we talk about them, but I want them to see them every day.
Every day.
And you're looking at it.
They have to be a part of every meeting. They have to be a part of every decision. How does that fit into the values? That's how those things come alive. It's not print and post on the wall. That's important. but it's how you then live them every single day and make them come alive.
Because we do talk about it, but my problem, Mike, is I always want to talk about one.
Mm.
One of the three is my favorite.
Yeah, sure.
So it's the one I talk about nonstop, and that's one team, one mission. Because I let that be a catch-all, and I shouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
But, that goes back to holding standards. If you let a teammate not hold the standard, that's my analogy is, well, we want everyone in the boat rowing the same way. And if one person drops that oar in that water just for a bit, guess what happens? The boat starts circling. Then you have someone look, and then another person puts it in. Now before long, we're going in a big circle. People are falling out of the damn boat. So one team, one mission is a big one of mine, but you just made it, you triggered something for me that's a takeaway is, I need to lean into the other core values that we have and use those as those decision blocks, because I've had to make some very uncomfortable decisions. When you have a very small team inside a very tight-knit community, departure is tough.
Yes.
Because no one ever clearly understands, because they don't see anything behind the curtain.
And you're not going to tell them. That would be totally appropriate.
They see the production once the curtain comes open. That's it.
That's right.
They don't see all of the work that goes into making the production happen.
That's right.
I get tickled. People ask me all the time, so what do you do all day when you're not coaching? I sit around, my feet kicked up,
Wait for the next class.
Yeah. It's hard to explain.
Yes.
It's like me saying, Mike, what do you do every day? You would never be able to give me you could give me a simple answer, but I would never truly understand what you had to go through every single day. And the gym world is surprisingly difficult with the amount of back end work that we have to do, coaches included. And that's, Mike, where I have trouble the most with my standards. It's the back end stuff. Everybody wants to be the coach when the spotlight's on. Nobody wants to sweep the floors once the show's over.
Yep.
I want to go get my coffee, go sit down and get in my car and go home or wait till the next one. Well, no, we got X, Y, and Z that we have to get done, because that's what we do here. That's what makes us different. I sat down with the lady yesterday, Mike, and I was very appreciative of her time. And she said, I just want to tell you something. She's 64 years old. And she said, I'm very picky about where, my whole life I have been, about where I've chose to train and do these things. He said, I just want to tell you that what you do here as a team and what you do as a gym is the best experience that I've ever had. And that just makes me smile, because even through the turmoil, to me, it looks like the world is spinning upside down on its axis because I demand such high levels of perfection and standards. We're still doing the right things.
Well, again, when you set the standard at an 8 or 9 or a 10 and you achieve a 7, it's 10 times better than people who have no standard and are delivering 2s all day long, and everybody feels it. You're not happy because you're not at your 9.
No, right. And that's a great way to look at it. And that's something that I am I have a young lady that's under me, and I'm hard on her, because I want to teach her for the future, her whole life. I want her to look back and say, he really helped me. But I have to be cautious, because that she can push that outwards, and it becomes, what's them against us. No, she's enforcing the standard.
Yeah, no, we want them all to be us.
Yes, there's no division here. And as to your point, it's just be consistent with the standards and don't worry about the emotions. You can still high five and be friends, but this is what we do. We make things complicated, Mike. We give ourselves roadblocks. We put things in the way to prevent us from reaching the standards. It's the old adage, if you would just do what you're asked to do instead of spending 15 minutes griping about it, you could have been done 10 times by now.
Somebody who does that. So I think about it this way. All high performers, every high performer I've ever met has pre-decided their behaviors. They know who they're going to be in the worst of the situations. And the people who are, call it phenoms, that become high performers that didn't do it through standards, break at some point along the way. Think about every professional athlete who's had a complete meltdown. It's because they didn't predefine their standards. Think about those that have lasted for eons, despite having barbs thrown at them in social media and on sports talk shows, wherever. They never break. They continue to perform. They continue to deliver at a super high level. Think about Tom Brady. The world hates this man, but he's the greatest that's ever walked the earth in the quarterback rating. because his standards are high. Why do they hate him? Mostly because his standards are really, really high. Mostly because of that. But so what?
Jealousy.
Look what he's achieved.
Yeah, jealousy is an evil thing.
Yeah.
It's it's just a matter of setting those standards, Mike, finding your path, getting your team to buy in, is one of the things that I feel like I've got to do a better job is getting the buy-in, having them understanding what the standards are, and then enforcement. Because like I said, we've had a complete shift, and then even this past month, I've had to let two more coaches, three more coaches go, and we are a small team, so it's just constant change, and that can wear you down too. When you're trying to constantly teach new people the standards, and just like, God, why can't you just get it?
Just figure it out. Yeah.
But
But it's true in every business. Standard conversation from way back when. I remember my first real job. I did lots of odd jobs as a kid, baling hay, stacking wood, etc. My first W-2 job was working at McDonald's. We talked about this before. In fact, it's where I met my wife. You've heard that story. Um, it was McDonald's, but our store manager standards were so freaking high. I really do think that everything that I've ever done and learned in business, aside from the way my dad created us as a family and a family unit, and my mom too, but he was more the standard bearer. She was more the the leniency police. Um, but in that store, there was no question when you were done cooking your burgers on that run, you were scraping and cleaning the grill. There was no question about it. There was no question that if a bun hit the floor, it didn't last there for more than 2 seconds. There was no question that if you were all done and there was no rush, you were wiping everything down. There was no question about what we were going to do as young kids. We didn't know crap about crap and didn't want to do any of this stuff, but the standard was the standard. And she got all of her managers, all of her shift managers to live it the same way. And it just created, I mean, it was McDonald's. Did it have to have such high standards? Of course not. But she created those standards, and it's been a model for me for the rest of my life. At the time, I thought she was an evil human. Now I look back on her with reverence as what a great leader she really was.
it's funny how that works out when you think about it. You have that impact moment. One of the things that we talk about in leadership training is think back to that one teacher or that one coach or maybe that one boss. One's going to stand out that said something to you or showed you a higher standard. And, you bring up an excellent point. Every day is an opportunity to help someone increase their standards. One, by living yours.
Yes.
One things I say on the mic all the time is you can't fix anyone else until you fix yourself. Nobody's going to listen to you. Nobody's going to believe you because, to your point, it's like taking health advice from someone that's extremely obese. I can't say how they got there, no, but are you going to listen to this person? We probably shouldn't. Truth be known, probably not the best solution. But to your point, when you're in the consulting business now, people look at you as a high standard, high performing person. That didn't happen by accident or flash in the pan. This has been who you wanted to be for some time now. Did you have to make an adjustment 4 or 5 years ago? Yes. But when you did, you swung the needle and it has rapidly changed who you are as a person. To that point, this isn't rocket science. It's the same thing we say, and I say it to myself, I say it to my clients. The sheet of paper is blank every single morning. You can write whatever story you want on it, man.
What do you want to read at the end of the day?
And people, if they would just do that more often, I don't have time. Well, when will you?
Well, you're going to do something today. Yeah, something's going to happen today. What do you want it to be?
Yeah, so I think that, you're just a remarkable testimony to having the standards. But your teammates on your teams, Mike, when we talk about standards over feelings, from a manager's perspective, how do you teach your managers, your main leaders of your teams, to develop candor with the employees, but not get too close,
Yeah.
but also have that level of professionalism to hold the line no matter, hurt feelings or not? How do you reinforce that behavior? How do you teach it?
Well, I think mostly through osmosis. I think mostly through what is observed, through what they see you do, through how they see your interactions. You know, one of the coolest things about selling this company and having the opportunity to say goodbye and not, walking out the door the day we sold and being here, is now hearing back from everyone over these 8 years the impact that they tell me I've had in their leadership journeys. Right? I hate that word journey, so overused, but I think in this case it makes sense. But and so that's where the gratification comes back that you got something done, and it'd be cool for one person, but when it's I'm making up numbers, but 15 or 20 or 25 people who've told me things already, you go, okay, it's working. Whatever I did worked. And so now you try to peel it back because I got to go do this again. I got to go build another company somewhere else. How did I do it? And so honestly, I think I could have been more intentional in how we do it. I think a conversation around this with the executive team, with standards over feelings, is one that I will have now, very early on, wherever I go next. Because I think the sooner you can convey what the standards are, and the sooner you can convey to your team, I need you to hold the same standards. We're all going to have the same standards because I want the frontline team members to have the exact same standards we all have. The more likely it is that you're going to get there faster. You're going to get there one of two ways. Either people will adopt and want to be a part of that, or people will self-select out. But either way, you need that decision very soon because you can't have people dragging along.
So, Mike, let me ask you this. What happens when you bring someone in new? Okay.
Yep.
Whether they're an intern or a new employee, you give them the path. You show them the path. You give them a new hire binder. You go through that extensively. You're doing all the things that you do, whatever. How much leash you giving somebody when they really come in and are flat? What's your runway there? I know that's a very open, a very broad question, but
it totally depends on what role they're in. What size of the team do you have? How much? I mean, we've never been a huge team, but your team's even smaller, and so every single person on that team has to row. They all got to be rowing. You can't have anyone who's got one oar in the water or no oars in the water, because in both of those environments, you've got finite resources. You're not a big company where someone can hide and not perform for 3 months and no one knows. So it's one of those things where I'll tell you, we had a leader of one of our divisions that we brought in from the outside because they were recommended by one of our private equity operating advisors. She lasted 3 days in an executive C-level role reporting to me because she didn't have the character that I thought I witnessed in her several interviews that we held with her. And it was obvious by the middle of day one. Like, poof, we'll try this one more day. Let me coach her on who I said we were, and let's see what we see come out of her. And end of day two, no bueno. Called our operating advisor and said, hey man, I know you worked with her for a long time with this other big company, but ain't working here, and I'm gonna move. And he said, do what you gotta do.
That's part of the culture fit as well.
It is. It is. One of the things that I think is important for all leaders to do is when you're bringing somebody in the interview process, people will tell you whatever they can tell you to get the job. They will. It's just nature. But you have to tell them things too, and you have to tell them during that interview process, look, tell me whatever you want to tell me, but I'm going to evaluate you based on your character. And here's what character means to me and what it means to all the other people around here. So if you really can't do the Excel spreadsheet the way you say you can, it's a character problem, and we're going to know real soon. If you really can't have open and honest dialogue with other human beings, it's a character problem. And we're going to know about that real soon. So just know that if you're lying to me now, not the way you say it, we're going to know about it, and we're going to move on. So don't waste your time.
That's tough.
It's tough, but so I have conversations had in my old role, all the way down to the GM level. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5 layers below me before we ever made an offer to our GMs. Micromanagement, maybe to some degree, but I want to make sure they got that message around character. So I personally delivered it. I'm sure our team did too. I'm sure of it. But it just became kind of cultural that you met with Mike before you got a GM level job or above in the organization. And so we kept it going. And I think it prevented a lot of people who really should not have come from coming. And that's good. Even if they were the best candidate. You want them to self-select out when they hear, this is the way we run this organization.
Yeah, and that's something else that I've struggled with, Mike, especially with interns, right? Because what we do is we bring people in for a 12-week internship, regardless of your experience. Like if you were to come to me and say, Shane, I want to coach at your gym, And Mike, you'd been a personal trainer working in other gyms for 20 years. I'd say, okay, Mike, this is our standard and this is what we do.
I guarantee there's very few gyms that do it that way.
You're an intern because you
Yep.
got to make the team.
Yep.
You got 12 weeks to prove that you belong on this team and can hold the standard. Well, it's not working out lately.
Mm.
You know, I'm having to put interns out on the street week 3 through 6. And then the other team is like, you're not giving them enough of a chance.
That's the emotion, right? That's the, I care for these people. I like them. They can probably get there eventually. And the point is that if we're talking about weeks 3 through 6, that's a long time. I mean, it's a gym. It's a class. It's not rocket science. Either you can do it this way or you can't.
It's amazing, Mike. It is really amazing the level of differences of people that I see coming through those doors that you think these are simple tasks.
Yeah.
But to your point, my answer is consistent. It sucks.
Yeah.
Do I like making those phone calls? Because I'm also the HR manager.
Right.
No, I do not.
I think I want to go back out and have.
However,
do not.
To your point, to this entire call, I say back to them, what are our standards? What are our standards? Do you feel like this employee met the standards? Yes or no? There's no gray area here. Well, no, there's no well.
There's no well.
You don't, I almost said it. I almost gave a specific example. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
If Mike is supposed to be scheduled for a shift and Mike oversleeps and does not show up to that shift, guess what? You're an intern. Your ass is fired.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is going to be who you are. Now, again, there was a lot of things that happened before this, okay? Accidents do happen. I probably would give you one chance to redeem yourself, okay? I'm not that big of an ass, but there's patterns that you can see, Mike. There's extreme patterns. And when day one usually ends, to your point with your leader, I already know that I've either effed up or I've got to keep her. But the human side of me, Mike, gives them a couple of weeks, which makes it even harder.
Yep, because then you become more connected.
Well, that or they're confused. Well, why didn't you say something along the way? I've been trying to say something to you along the way.
Heard what I said.
You just consistently don't do what I ask.
Yes.
But the human part of me has a hard time with that. It's just the standard over the feeling can be a lot more difficult than what we're making it sound, because at the end of the day, you're affecting someone's ability to pay bills, to put food on their tables. It's tough.
I think it brings us to the last point that I wanted to make on this, which is you can honor your feelings without becoming beholden to them. In our first, I think it was our first episode we ever created was the red, blue, green on emotion, wasn't it? No. You're going to be red. You're going to be angry. You're going to be sad. You're going to be elated. There's going to be all kinds of emotions. As a human, you're going to have these emotions you have about these team members when you have to walk them out the door. But if you have a standard, as you communicated to your team, honor that feeling. I don't like feeling this way. I don't want to walk you out the door. However, the standard is a standard. This is where we're going to go. So it's recognizing we're not robots. We are humans with emotions, but recognizing how to get those emotions back to the green. The simplest way to stay in the green is have a standard around it. We've talked before about, you can be mercurial in situations, personal situations sometimes, right? But if you had a standard that said, even when I'm angry at my child, I'm making that up, or I'm having an argument with my spouse, even when I'm feeling that way, here's how I'm going to treat them. You're going to revert to the standard and stop being an asshole. And so that's the mission, is if you create those standards, recognize where your feelings are. That's the only way to get back to green. Get back to the standard.
Mike, before we close, what's one thing that you can say for someone to do to set, I don't know if it's set higher standards for themselves? What's a baseline tactic that someone can do today? I know you talked about the to-be list, and I'm already kind of counting that, but to your point, like someone that's just in a place they're like, God, I can't win for losing. I'm out of shape. I don't like feeling this way. I can't get any job promotions. We all been there, and we all know who these people are. They're all around us.
Yes.
They may not vocally say it out loud, but people live in a lot of valleys. There's a lot of people in a valley right now. I'm in a damn valley. I am in a valley right now, dude, and I am ready to climb back up the mountain. to your point, I've had to make a lot of self-discovery changes to get me through this. And that just means a lot of times to where I have to just sit and reflect and say, okay, what is my standard on this topic? And can I improve that standard to where that becomes who I am, my default? It gets frustrating. I get frustrated with you. I'm like, dude, beating my head up against the wall. Geez. But then it's just a reminder, usually 2 or 3 texts later, I'm like, I'm over it, pity party over. But what's something that somebody can do to create the standard for whatever area of their life they need to create it in? Because once they have that model, they can emulate that model into other parts of their life. Or maybe I'm asking the wrong question.
No, I got.
What's the first standard that someone needs to work on?
I think I've got a great answer. I think for everyone it can be something different. But if you follow the 4F-bomb framework, faith, family, fitness, and finance, some of those are kind of dependent on the others. You can't, I don't think, be really great at finance until you've gotten your family in order. I think it's difficult to be great at family until you understand where you live on the faith spectrum and what are your moral standards around that. But I think until you learn how to have discipline in all facets of life, you can't do any of those 3 things. And I think the first place to start to learn discipline, we've talked about this a million times. I'm biased, obviously, because of the change it's had in me. The first place to truly learn discipline is in fitness, is to create a fitness goal, not a 7-day a week. I'm gonna lose 30 pounds in 2 weeks. It is a daily grind in fitness to take a focus on yourself and just commit to that one thing. 20 minutes a day. Come to FitBody. Go to the gym and pick out your favorite workout program. You don't even have to be structured yet, but 20 minutes a day for 5 days a week. Make it 7 if you want to really get there, and just stay committed. What it will teach you when you have to do the hard thing every day, even though emotionally you don't want to get up, it's too cold, you got some stuff to do, whatever. And then when you go to the gym, you progressively increase the weight till it becomes uncomfortable if you're doing that kind of workout, or you progressively increase the level of effort you put out in a FitBody boot camp on a workout. When you put yourself in harm's way and do hard things, the callus that it builds up in your mind around your emotions, around your feelings, to do hard things even when it's uncomfortable, gets a lot easier. So to me, Shane, that's where I would start. What are your thoughts?
I agree totally. It's easy for us to say because we live it, but we live it because it works.
But we didn't.
No.
We had to build the callus. We had to get ourselves in
there. Fitness is the gateway. And I don't care what anybody says. Sure, there's other gateways to self-improvement. But to me personally, getting yourself in order, when someone likes the way they look, they achieve greater success in every other area of their life. And liking the way you look, maybe 2 days after the gym, say, I already feel different. I'm not saying this is some 6-year journey. I'm saying after your first day, you're like, you know what? I like that. I like the way that this made me feel, and I like the way this is going to make me look. So it's contagious.
Yes.
It's the right type of dopamine because, to your point, to keep pointing at the hat, you're uncomfortable when you work out sometimes. But what's more uncomfortable to you? Staying exactly where you are or being uncomfortable making the change? Because the reward for being uncomfortable making the change is much greater than continuing just to kick the can down the road and saying one day I'll do this. Well, you're going to one day yourself until it's too late.
That's exactly.
And then you're like, crap, what happened? Then you have a mountain to climb to get back to where you want to be. So I get a lot of used to's. It's one of my favorite words now. Used to be in shape, used to be a high school star, used to.
Yep.
Okay, then when I say what changed? Well, life. Okay, well, life is going to happen to every one of us. But the reality is nothing changes if nothing changes. So what are you willing to give up to get back to where you want to go? Have you had that conversation with yourself? Because to tie us all together, my last point is, Mike, like we said before, everybody starts out with that uninformed optimism, shiny object syndrome. I want to make this change. I want to set a higher standard. That's uninformed optimism. Yeah, let's go do that. Then all of a sudden we go to workouts. We get the gym going. It's not easy to get up at 5 o'clock every morning. It's not easy to meal prep. It's not easy to make these changes. Well, guess what? Now you have the valley of despair. You're uninformed. Now you're in the valley. Everybody hits it in the beginning. Two people, two choices, two standards. One is going to say, F it, I'm just going to turn my alarm on. It's not worth it. The other one's going to come to the other side, and now they have informed optimism. They've completed the cycle.
Mm-hmm.
I know this is uncomfortable, but I want these changes, and it's way more uncomfortable to be here than here. So you've completed that circle of uninformed to informed optimism. Now you know the type of discipline that it takes to make the change.
It's kind of like faith in the regard that you're doing this work and it's hard, but you don't have any, you don't see anything changing yet because it's early. And so you're doing all this hard work and you're getting up early and nothing's changing. And you're like, God damn it, why am I doing this? And that's why people quit in January. That's why people quit after their first or second month, because they can't see the change yet. Just like when you're deep in your faith, you're not talking directly to God yet, but you believe that that's where it's going to go. And you see that it's happened that way for other people. And so that's the difference, is people who are willing to take that faith journey, whether it be in fitness or faith, and get to the other end of it.
Amen.
I would just say, Shane, great conversation, great way to wrap it up. And by the way, if fitness, I mean, Shane and I are obviously focused on that, but if fitness isn't your entry point, fine. Pick one of the other 3 F-bombs and get after it. But make the change, man. Make a commitment to being something other than what you are today. Create your standards. Create 1 or 2. Get hard after it, and just watch your life change. It's totally different when you don't have to make decisions. You just follow the standards that you've already created. Do it in your job tomorrow. If you've got a team, you're running a team, go to work and sit down and talk about your values, whether they be the company's core values or the values you need to create amongst your team. Do that tomorrow. You're going to see a difference if you live those values. You can't just talk about them once. You got to now make them part of everything you do. But man, take that leap. You're going to feel totally different. Shane, that's all I've got for this week.
I think that's fantastic, Mike. Little shameless plug here. You know, if this is something that you like, this is something that you think would be beneficial to you, Mike and I are planning some things in the future, some speaking engagements, some other things. And again, we would love to be able to come and help your teams, solo, individually, groups, whatever facet, to learn how to build these standards and to help guide you through that through one of our workshops. We're available to get you on the schedule, but you never know. They fill up quick. So Mike, I just wanted to kind of offer that. We would love to help other people get back on track.
It's what we're passionate about. So if you want to do that, just check us out at our website, www.leadershipignitionteam.com, and we can help you in a million ways. Take a look and give us a ring. We got a contact section there. You can also just chat directly with Shane and I, and it's really us. We're on the other end of that chat button. So give it a go.
Right on. Mike, we say put a big old bow on this episode.
Yes, sir. It was a great one.
Welcome back into the studio, and look forward to ripping some more of these out with you soon, my friend. And good luck on your transition. And hopefully we can cheers some glasses soon, my friend.
That'd be great.
All right, everybody. Thank you guys for listening to the Leadership Ignition podcast. We hope you have a great day, a great week. Remember, it's free to be kind. But my man Mike, as always, what are we going to do today?
We're going to
let's get lit, my friend. All right.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Leadership Ignition Team podcast. Go to our website at www.leadershipignitionteam.com to subscribe to our weekly newsletter, engage with us, and find again favorite podcast networks, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube.